Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Basel Pod. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Jordan Laube. And Jordan, this is our first podcast that we've done since the 2025 NFL Draft. So, checking in. How's everything going? How's your summer been?
Dude, summer's been great. It's been wild. Just had a baby girl in the beginning of June. She is 9 weeks old as of Wednesday. I don't know when this is going to go live, but she'll probably be 10 weeks by the time it does. But it's been awesome. I took a big step back from my usual draft coverage, my NFL coverage, because when you have a kid, your life kind of early on gets put on pause, but now we're making it a point that we don't acclimate our life to the baby, we acclimate the baby to our lives. And I think if everyone learns from that, I think that everyone would be a more successful parent, I think. And Haven's been awesome. Haven is our baby girl. She's been amazing. She wakes up maybe once during the middle of the night. She slept through the night 2 nights ago, which is great for a 9-week-old, and that's like relatively consistent. So summer's been great. We just got back from a long trip visiting my parents on Long Island, so can't complain. How are you?
Dude, that's awesome. Love to hear all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, summer's been great for me, but yeah, obviously, congrats again on baby Haven. I know we've talked about it a lot off the pod, but I just wanted to say on the pod, it's great to find out that great to know that we've got our first house enterprise baby.
Yes, sir.
So only a matter of time before she's on here breaking down routes.
For sure, definitely.
So, talking football, we're about 3 to 4 weeks out from the start of the 2025 NFL season. I'm hyped. I know you're hyped. And for the next, 3 weeks or so, we're going to be breaking down all 8 divisions in depth, talking about all four teams in each division, their expectations heading into this year, how those expectations were set by last year's performance, roster turnover, player progression, et cetera, pretty much everything you need to know heading into the 2025 season for your team. Then later on, we're going to do some playoff predictions as well as some early awards talk. But since this is the first episode of this 2025 NFL preview series, I did want to talk about some, overarching NFL news, specifically with their upcoming media rights deal. As plenty of you saw last week, the NFL and ESPN announced a major partnership going forward. ESPN and their parent company, Disney, have acquired the NFL network. They've also acquired NFL.com's fantasy offerings. They've also acquired NFL Red Zone, naturally as part of NFL Network. So now all of those media offerings are now going to be under the ESPN and Disney content umbrella in exchange for a 10% equity stake in ESPN for the NFL. I'm assuming that 10% is going to come out of Disney's 80% that they currently have in ESPN. The other 20% of that is coming out of Hearst Communications. I haven't really been able to confirm that from any sources that have come out so far, but I'm assuming that's what it's going to be. Just some other, facts about this deal. Red Zone, NFL Network, ESPN Fantasy, or NFL.com Fantasy, all being absorbed into ESPN. ESPN is getting more NFL games on the NFL Network as a result of this merger. Obviously, all those Thursday night games that would usually be on – Thursday Night Football is on Amazon now. But, a lot of the games that would traditionally get slated for the NFL Network, a lot of those being like the 9:30 a.m. London games or the Munich games and stuff like that, those are going to be probably going to get ESPN crews, manning those broadcasts. NFL Red Zone, we're unsure, of any sort of major programming changes with that. Like, I guess we'll have to see. But just a very, very interesting deal for ESPN as they've made a lot of changes in recent years. Obviously for any baseball fans, they're moving away from Major League Baseball broadcasting. Obviously, Major League Soccer many years ago has gone over to Apple TV, so they've kind of got a lot of free space on the network to just kind of slot in a lot more football. And it's kind of a focus that we've seen ESPN shift to over recent years. But I think a lot of people were shocked just by the the sheer size of this deal. I don't know if you thought that, Jordan, but I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts over on this deal.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Number one, because ESPN is, or just Disney in general, is like trying to blanket and create this umbrella into every media possible. And when you're one of the biggest media companies out there, that's kind of what is going to happen with the type of system we have. But on top of that, I don't think it's all bad, because I think ESPN has actually done a really good job when it comes to NFL coverage in general, at least from the analytics side, which I take a big interest in, and in terms of who they've been bringing in to push the game forward on NFL Live, some of the other shows that they have as well. I think they have done a good job. I think there's some areas where if they put certain big media personalities in certain spots, wink, wink, Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee, unwink, wink, we're going to see that drive down. And like, I know people like Pat McAfee. I know some people like Stephen A. Smith. I think that's just for clicks. And I think that's just for hot takes and for quick news is to go to those people. I don't think those would be the people driving this new level of content that ESPN has acquired, especially Red Zone. You know, they said Scott Hansen's still going to run it this year. I'm assuming he'll continue to run it, for at least the next 3 years. I would hate to see someone else take over, but it's going to happen at some point, whether Scott moves on to a new opportunity or they replace him, whether he retires or they just get rid of him. Who knows? That's kind of just my only worry, but that will happen eventually. So I'm just happy it's not happening now, because I think Red Zone is the biggest one everyone has a hang up on. But I think people like Mina Kimes, Ben Solak, some of the NFL alums that they brought in, Allen Robinson. I'm trying to think. There's another former NFL guy. Dan Orlovsky is like what he does with the VR is so sick. If anyone could check that out, they do QB VR where he in real time is diagnosing defenses how NFL QB is doing, and it's one of the coolest things. I think it looks janky as hell, but I think it's one of the coolest things ESPN has done in recent years. So with the NFL personalities they're bringing in, the analytics personalities they're bringing in, you're seeing this mesh of true ball knowledge, I feel like, where you have people who watch film, people who dive into the analytics, and marrying it together to really see, hey, who are the top NFL players, rather than NFL Network putting out their top 100 list. And it is clearly shifted from the actual top 100 to clickbait and seeing who, like, just to stir controversy, right? Because that just clicks. That's what matters, right? So I think it's going to be good long term. I think a lot of the short term hangups are going to fall by the wayside. And I think something interesting Roger Goodell brought up is that Red Zone could expand to other sports. And I don't think Roger Goodell would say that if that wasn't already in the works, like college football, baseball, hockey. You could even see tennis, basketball, like there's soccer, like Red Zone could be so unique and great into different sports, and especially college football, where we're going to see multiple top-ranked teams playing at the same time. And instead of having to multi-screen on YouTube TV, someone's running the show. And I would love to see Andrew Siciliano come back into the fold, because I know he ran the alternative Red Zone for the NFL. If he could do college football, and again, it depends on his knowledge base. Daniel Jeremiah is someone I think also could do well with that, since he's a big-time scout for NFL Network. I don't know if he'd be interested in running a show like that, but I think the easiest shoe-in for college football is Siciliano. And then you could keep Pat McAfee on game day and run the show from there. Because, again, like Pat McAfee is who he is. I think he actually does a good job with game day. But as an analyst guy, I want him as far away from that side of ESPN as possible. But yeah, I think it's a good move long term, especially with the potential that is there. Will ESPN capitalize on it? We'll see.
Yeah, a lot of great points. I kind of wanted to respond to a couple of them. First, like the personality part of it, right? Obviously, we've seen a lot of ESPN offerings in the last couple of years. They've really looked to try and make their broadcasts, specifically game broadcasts, more accessible to, maybe a casual or even an uninterested viewer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the two biggest things, right, are the Manning casts on Monday Night Football, and then on the baseball side of things, obviously this is going away once ESPN stops broadcasting MLB, but inspired by the Manning cast on Sunday Night Baseball, then they had the A-Rod and Michael K cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly those are great. Also, I can't forget during the national championship game, they literally have a Pat McAfee like on field cast, right?
Yep.
I think all those are great. To be honest, I don't watch them because I don't really feel like, for me as someone who's just trying to get like a really, really deep like understanding of the game that I'm watching, I feel like I don't really need that. You know what I mean? But I also feel like they do have their advantages for a lot of viewers. And what's great about this deal that ESPN is working on, for anybody that's kind of worried that watches the game, like I watch the game or like you watch the game, that's worried that these broadcasts are going to get overtaken by, kind of more casual, fun focused broadcasts. I think we're fine. I really do, because again, ESPN is launching this direct to consumer service later this month. That's kind of going to become the replacement for ESPN Plus. That's going to launch on August 21st. It's going to be like $30 a month. I know a lot of people in WWE circles are talking about it because WWE pay-per-views are going to be on that going forward in 2026. But with that broadcast, I mean, it's all streaming now. We're not locked to two linear TV channels, right? Where like you're worried that the broadcast that you want to get is not going to be available. Like they are going to have the options available for you. So I really think that's fine. Yeah. And going on your second point with an expansion of Red Zone into other sports, we've definitely already seen some other sports try and take advantage of that. Obviously, Apple TV with their MLS deal that's been going on since I think 2022, they have really focused on, a lot of people like to call it Red Zone, but I feel like a lot of people got to remember that it's called Red Zone because the Red Zone is the football Red Zone. But if we're talking in sort of like a generic term, like a Kirkland brand term for that type of coverage, it's called whip around, right? Because you're whipping around from game to game, match to match. MLS has started their own version of that. That's gotten pretty popular, and it's gotten to the point where not only is Apple TV trying to get people to watch the whip around coverage, but the MLS, because they're only being broadcast on Apple TV with select games on Fox Sports 1, they have completely changed the way that they've scheduled games over the last couple of years, where they've followed an NFL style of broadcast, where instead of, games, you got a Thursday night 8:30 game, a Tuesday night 7 o'clock game, and then like a bunch of games tipping off throughout Saturday and Sunday. You've got pretty much, with some variation, a Wednesday slate of everything starting at 7:30, and then you've got a Saturday and Sunday slates with everything starting at 4 games starting at 4:30, 4 games starting at 7:30, and then you got like 1 or 2 games going on at 10:30 p.m. And all of that is specifically designed to make the whip around coverage more compelling. And for me, I thought that was incredible to see. Not really in a great way. I was just kind of in awe that MLS would want to do that with their coverage. Yeah, because it's like, oh wow, we are totally focusing on a red zone style broadcast. Like I just thought that was incredibly remarkable. On Major League Baseball, the MLB network, they've got MLB Big Inning, which is, they kind of whip around to the different local broadcasters of any games that might be going on kind of a weeknight. And then in the NBA, you've got on NBA TV, NBA Crunch Time. So, yeah, I could totally see this expanding. I think it might get a little complicated because a lot of these other leagues, aside from MLS, don't have like as centralized of like a broadcasting nature that NFL does. Like NFL is never on like local networks.
No,
you know what I mean? It's always on like the big three, like over the air networks. So I think they have the advantage there. But yeah, I could totally see, ESPN wanting to expand this to a ton of other sports. So yeah, it's going to be remarkable.
Absolutely, yeah. And to your point about, I think there's ways to do it for other sports that make it compelling and interesting, right? Because like in the NBA, it's like NBA, NHL, soccer, obviously, it's constant action. Like there's constantly moving going on outside of timeouts or fouls or whatever, right? So like You would just have to find a way to, like, based on the flow of the game, pinpoint. And if they do implement it for other sports, besides soccer, because soccer already has a base for it, it's going to be a mess to start. It's completely fine. But it's a good mess because you're going to get eyes on it, and it's still going to be constant action. Like, are the transitions going to be as perfect? And not that red zone is perfect itself, but, like, I feel like they've done a really good job of highlighting, based on game flow, even if a team's not in the red zone, if they're driving, they throw them on now. Like, if they're at the 40 about to cross the 50 and they were in their own end zone to start, they're throwing that on even though they're not in the red zone. Like, they're like, hey, this team's picking up steam, momentum, they're driving and come back, or they're trying to expand their lead to make it harder for the other team. They're putting that on screen. Where I feel like it used to be even 3 years ago, it was, hey, if they're in the red zone, this is on. If no one's in the red zone, we're just going to put whoever is closest, right? Like, it's like, I don't want to watch a red zone clip of a team in the red zone if they're up by 3 touchdowns, about to go up by 4, right? Like, that's just, okay, cool. I'd rather see the team that's close and competitive. And they have really shifted that. And that is now it's just so much better for the consumer. And that's why red zone has grown the way it has, is now it's not just nonstop action. It's nonstop meaningful action.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about it on previous podcasts before, but I think people with how big red zone is going to become now across all sports, at least I think that's where it's going. It's going to be the level of people that are going to be bored during big primetime games because the action isn't nonstop, and it's going to create this kind of this rhythm of people want to see nonstop action, and then you see games slow down. Takes are going to get even more extreme. Well, this guy isn't as good as this guy. I was like, well, that guy's on red zone constantly because his team sucks, and he's only in 1 and 4 o'clock games, versus this quarterback has 6 primetime games, and you're seeing actual football be played, and you're only seeing them complete 60% of their passes. Like, you can't say someone sucks because they play more prime. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I see what you're saying.
It's takes that have been happening in football. They're going to happen for a lot of other games. So it's up to people like us to say, hey, football's more than primetime games and more than the red zone. All these sports are more than these little intricate moments. It's the whole sample size that you have to look at, right? And I think that's something we're kind of straying away from in sports media in general, and I want to kind of help drive to push that back, which is why I wanted to – this is why I pitched the idea to you, a month ago or a couple weeks ago, that I want to do podcasts like this. And people will, as they're listening and watching, they'll kind of see how this is going to flow. But I want to focus more on the things that actually matter for football rather than just looking at the macro stats and looking at, hey, this is, this quarterback had this many yards, he's so good. Or this quarterback had this, had a lower TD to INT ratio, so he's worse than this guy, right? Like, football is so intricate and so complicated and tough to bring down to the micro level in a way that's absorbable and understandable, where it's not just black and white. There's a lot of gray area. Hence why, this wasn't done on purpose, but, gray shirt, gray area kind of works out.
Absolutely. And before we get into our first team that we're going to be breaking down, I did want to give one more take on the ESPN deal. If we can get more episodes of NFL Matchup with Sal Paolantonio and Greg Cosell at a more reasonable time than 3 a.m., I'd really appreciate it.
That's a great call.
But let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of this podcast, and we're breaking down our first division of the 2025 NFL season. We figured we'd start with the home of the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the rest of their NFC East opponents. Let's start off with the Eagles. Obviously, They came in last year, Super Bowl champs, took down the Chiefs as kind of a retribution for 2 seasons prior. They kind of stopped a potential, major Chiefs dynasty if it doesn't already exist, right? Like they stopped a Chiefs three-peat right in their tracks. Jalen Hurts, while really, you look at his stats in the regular season and the playoffs, like his regular season over 15 games, by all metrics, good. Not really his best by any metric in his 4 years in the NFL. But then you go to the playoffs, and even taking out the Super Bowl MVP, I mean, this is his best postseason effort. I mean, he just really, really turned it up.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, what was kind of the driving force for this Eagles team last year? Was it Jalen Hurts? Was it somebody else? What allowed them to kind of turn it on in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl?
Am I allowed to say it's Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni? Because how they have built this roster and built this staff is just unbelievable to any team that we've ever seen. Jeff Lurie is obviously involved in that as well. But the roster construction on this team, top to bottom, and from a depth perspective, is so damn good. And they are going to be set for life until at least 2029. Like, this is a team that might be the first team to ever three-peat a Super Bowl, as long as they keep backfilling the way that they at least did this offseason, right? And those players continue to get better and better the way that we've seen over the past several years, i.e. Jalen Hurts, right? And look, I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts guy in terms of the player as a passer, but what he brings in as an athlete, as a quarterback, as a leader, and being the face of this franchise cannot be understated enough. He is, in terms of what he does for this team, from, I don't want to say mojo, but I think that's the really only word I can use, but from a mojo and vibes perspective, I know that's not overly analytical, right? As I said, I want this to be, but what he does for them from that standpoint and how he opens up the offense with his legs, with his middle of the field passing, with how he controls the line of scrimmage is something that a lot of quarterbacks can take from and expand their games further. With that said, the supporting cast he has is absolutely bar none the best in the NFL. He's had the best offensive line, consistently ranked by PFF over the past 3 years. They've been the number one offensive line. And they've had some turnover on the offensive line too, but they're still really damn good. This defense was one of the best in the NFL last year, and a lot of that was Vic Fangio. And not just him, but the guys buying in, because Vic Fangio defenses don't work when you have a couple of rogue players that don't buy into the system, because it's so heavily tailored to all 7 guys in the back end work together in coverage and letting the pass rush do its thing. And if you look at the Miami Dolphins, they had 2 or 3 personalities that thought they were better than the system, which might have been true. So they didn't buy into the system, and they got beat consistently. So people thought Vic Fangio was done as a DC. But he just showed that he is still a top 5 DC in this league with how he runs this defense and their match quarter system. And I think the emergence of Zach Bond moving from a stand-up edge to off-ball Mike linebacker, and was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year, cannot be overstated enough. Cooper DeJean was perfect as a slot corner. Quinion Mitchell was an island. He covered half of a field on his own. He was consistently the one going away from trips and playing that deep quarter and deep third and matching with some of the best receivers this game has to offer. The pass rush is incredible, top to bottom. Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt really emerged as really good defensive ends, especially after Brandon Graham went down with his injury. We'll get into some of the other pass rushers as I go along this, but the defense was great. Offensive line was awesome, as they always are. Receiving core is one of the best in the NFL, and obviously Saquon Barkley, goes without saying, goes for over 2,000 yards, has the best year of his career, and of course, he goes from a bottom 10 offensive line his entire time when he was with the Giants to the number 1 offensive line. That was such a home run value to bring him into Philly. So I think the whole culmination of the team, how this roster is built, how the offensive defense was ran, has really been awesome just to see how all of it has come together, and you blew out a team looking for a three-peat. And we'll get into the Chiefs. That'll be the last episode. Will be the AFC West. So we'll get into the Chiefs when we get there. That was the worst Chiefs team we're ever going to see. And they still made it to the Super Bowl. And if not for Pat Mahomes' pick, probably could have been competitive in that game, at least until halftime. But once he threw that pick and Coop took it for 6, their whole offensive game plan was thrown out the window. And you had to have Pat Mahomes do something or just elevate the offense more than what it was able to do. And just with Matt Nagy running that offense and just no star power anywhere on that team, offensively at least, you can't do much against that defense. So to make a long story short, we're going to talk about Jalen Hurts more in depth. I have a lot of analytics on him that I went in deep dove. It took me about 10 hours to put everything together. But, there's a lot of debate. Is he top 5? Is he top 10? And that's kind of ran football discourse. Is he better than Cam Newton? Which they're two completely different players. Sorry. Just because someone's a dual threat quarterback that can run people over doesn't mean they're the same exact friggin' player. Yeah. So we're going to get into that. But the first thing I want to go into is roster turnover. And I think, especially defensively, the turnover this Eagles team is going to have, it's going to be a tall bill to order. And if this first preseason game was any indication of how this defense is going to play, or at least who is projected to start is going to play, they're going to have some rough patches in the beginning of the season. So first off, CJ Gardner-Johnson, 907 snaps. He's gone. He's in Houston, battling an injury, but should be good to play. Mekhi Becton, who broke out as a guard last year, 903 snaps. That's a lot to try and replace. Darius Slay, 698 snaps. Keely Ringo is supposed to be the guy taking over, but he hasn't done it. He hasn't played well his entire career in the limited time he has. And he got absolutely – it's not that Jamar Chase was barely beating him. Jamar Chase was torching him and made him look like a college freshman. Like that level of bad, Keely Ringo. So Darius Slay losing him is going to be a huge bill to try and replace. Maybe Keely can figure it out, but we'll see. Josh Sweat goes to the Cardinals, 622 snaps lost there. So lose one of your big edge guys. Milton Williams, who turned it on last year, 500 snaps. He's in New England. We'll talk about how they're going to replace that later on with my dark horse candidate. Isaiah Rodgers, nickel hybrid corner, 329 snaps. A third of the season. You have to replace that somehow. Brandon Graham, retired, 311 snaps. He was on pace for 480 before his injury, so I think that's significant. Kenneth Gainwell, their spellback, 300 snaps lost. It looks like Will Shipley is going to pick up that role. A.J. Dillon is just going to be the downhill guy when they need a yard and they don't want to tush push. And then Oren Burks, I wanted to talk about him. Only 147 snaps in the regular season, but after Nakobe Dean went down, he came in and played 230 snaps in 4 games. That's a big deal, and he was pretty damn good in those 4 games. So a lot of guys they lost, good amount of depth as well. So how are they going to replace that? What are they going to do to make that happen? They brought in some guys via the draft, via free agency. It's kind of fit the bill. I think this Eagles defense is not going to be as good as it was last year, especially in the first half of the season, but kind of like how the Ravens turned it around in the back half of the year last year. First half of the year, they were one of the worst defenses. Second half of the year was one of the best. I think we're going to see something similar to that for the Eagles as we roll into 2025.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed when you brought that list of kind of subtractions, right, in front of me, I noticed how heavy it was on the defensive side than it was on the offensive side. And, looking at it, out of the 2 offensive players that were listed, Mekhi Becton and Kenneth Gainwell, you talked about in the beginning how great this offensive line was for Philly. Obviously, you need a great offensive line to run a play like the tush push, which, is still remains controversial in this league. I, not to get off on another side tangent, but I personally does not bother me. I just think if you don't like it so much, stop it. Yeah, or stop it. If you think it's so dumb and petty and cheap, run it yourself. I don't understand why more teams just don't want to do it. But you have a great offensive line, and you only lose Mekhi Becton. I say only, but I mean Mekhi Becton is a fantastic guard. But in terms of that overall unit, how important is keeping that through training camp, going into this season, been for this Eagles roster, and how important will it be down the stretch?
It's going to be really important, right? Like, they have a couple of guys they're looking to backfill. Tyler Steen's going to be competing for that right guard spot. But even the turnover itself, right? Like, Cam Jurgens, decent center. Obviously not Jason Kelce level. He's one of the best of all time at the position. Yep. But kind of coming in and having Landon Dickerson next to him and Mekhi Becton transition from tackle to guard showed that, hey, I can work with someone who's new to the position or at least new to me on my right side, and I can make it work. And I have this absolute anchor in Landon Dickinson on my left side. Like, it cuts out half the work from him having someone like Landon, who is one of the best guards in the league. He's just a road grader, especially in the run game. Like, when they run tush push, more often than not, Jalen Hurts is going to the left because of Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata, 700 pounds of mass just plowing through the left side of the defense. And a lot of that takes pressure off Cam Jurgens' plate. So I think left side is really good. Obviously, they're going to need a replacement for Lane Johnson within a year or two, because I don't know how much longer he's going to play, but he's still one of the best offensive tackles in the league. So even if Steen is in there, Jurgens' play is going to elevate because now he's got a full year under his belt. Now he's going to be able to show Tyler Steen, hey, this is how our offense runs. This is how we work together and operate. So those two can work together. And having a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame right tackle next to you is really going to help Tyler Steen. So I think a lot of people are worried about how he's going to do filling in for Mekhi Becton. I think he is in the perfect situation for someone replacing a starter. I don't think it's going to be that big of a competition. I believe Trevor Keegan is behind him, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that. But I don't think Trevor is going to really push him to take reps away. But if he does, Keegan is a hell of a run blocker himself. And this team, they have one of the heaviest run pass splits in the league, or one of the most balanced run pass splits in the league. They run more than anyone else on a percentage standpoint. So I think if he does win the job over Tyler Steen, it's going to be a similar situation. Jurgens is going to help him out. Lane Johnson is going to help him out. And they're just going to run the shit out of this football like they did last year. So, and I think moving forward, as long as they find a good replacement for Lane Johnson, this offensive line is not going to miss a beat, especially if Cam Jurgens does take that next step and they figure out who the long-term answer is at right guard. Because if you have that answer, whoever's replacing Lane Johnson, their job just became a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the name that really stuck out to me that the Eagles are losing. I mean, they released him, obviously, in March, and then he signed with the Steelers the next day on a one-year, $10 million contract, that being Darius Slay.
Yeah.
Obviously, what about that move? What about Darius Slay do you think caused the Eagles front office to just let him go? And then what could they potentially lose with him moving to the Steelers? If anything, maybe they feel like they're fine.
I think this is more so. I don't think it's addition by subtraction, but I think they're getting ahead of the curve and want to get younger faster. They know that this defense, with as much turnover as it's going through, at least in the front six, front seven, they run a ton of nickel. So really, it's the front six. They run the lightest boxes in the NFL. I think they ran 63%, and the next closest was 52% in terms of light box versus heavy box. I think this is just ripping the Band-Aid off, right? Like, Darius Slay is getting older. He started to trail off towards the end of last season. You have Quinyon Mitchell, who's really solid. You obviously have Cooper DeJean, who's going to play more exclusively in the slot for the most part. But if you get caught in a pickle, you could move him outside if you wanted to. I think this is just a move they're getting ahead of now, so this way they don't have to worry about it later. They can bring in someone cheap and save themselves cap room later on when their cap is going to explode in 2029. So I think they just want to kind of put a patch on it, whether it's Keely Ringo. I believe Dory Jackson just got signed as well. Not just signed, but he's with the team. I might be wrong on Dory, but I know there's a Jackson on that team in the secondary. But either way, whoever is taking over that cornerback 2 spot, I don't think is going to be the long-term answer unless they're great out of the window, right? Like, if they are serviceable enough to not be a weak spot in the secondary, or at least be heavily targeted, and they force teams to throw to Quinyon and Cooper DeJean more, they'll be happy with whoever's in that spot. But if they get picked on a ton, that's going to be a huge loss that we're going to see, because teams last year, they were like, all right, do I throw to Quinyon Mitchell, who's one of the best zone match corners in the league out of the gate, because that's what he excelled in college, or do I throw to Darius Slay, who's one of the most savvy veteran corners in the league, and if I just miss my throw, he's picking it off or batting it to the ground? Who are you going to pick? Now, this year, it's, okay, I'm obviously avoiding Quinyon Mitchell. I have to see where Cooper DeJean is. And if they're on opposite sides of the field, I need to hit a tight window. But if I force them to the same side and I force an ISO one-on-one against your quarterback too, you better hope that my quarterback throws a bad pass, because other than that, you're going to have no chance of stopping it. And that's what the Bengals did against Keely Ringo. Granted, wasn't the full starting defense. It's still the fact remains that the most glaring issue on this team is cornerback too. And they have to figure something. They have to figure out a way to complement that and figure out how they're going to mask that as best as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I know we kind of alluded to it, but I do want to get into the Jalen Hurts discussion. I know that you said Jalen Hurts this season, particularly his playoff performance, kind of caused you to rethink your top 10 quarterback discussion. And now the moment of truth. After a whole summer of thinking and pondering and watching tape, where does Jalen Hurts sit amongst the league's quarterbacks for you?
I still think he's outside the top 10. And that's including let me preface it with this. I did a full breakdown of the past 3 years of passing, from basic metrics to advanced metrics and watching tape. This was like my big summer project that I had in terms of doing my research. And the biggest thing for me was I wanted to look at quarterbacks who have played all three of the last season. So, and they had at least 600 dropbacks, or 650, I think was the metric or the number I used. And the reason being is that football is so cumulative and sample size based that you can't, in my opinion, and other people disagree with me, but in my opinion, if a quarterback is 2 to 3 years in their career, you cannot be putting them in top 10 conversations at the position, especially your quarterback. You could arguably do it for other positions. Like Brock Bowers, obviously is already a top 10 tight end, and no one's going to argue that. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is already a top 10 corner. You can't argue that, because how the system works for those defenses, or at least for Brock Bowers as a position player on offense, the scheme isn't going to change as much as it does on offense. And you can't attack offenses. You can attack offenses more defensively than offenses can attack defenses and find weak points faster, at least in my opinion, right? So when we look at Jalen Hurts as a quarterback, as a passer, again, this is leaving rushing aside. This is just passing, right? He is one of those quarterbacks who over the past 3 years has given us a really good sample size. And I looked at just the regular season, because while postseason success matters, postseason success is, quarterbacks do not drive teams to the playoffs. And if that was the case, or if quarterbacks winning Super Bowls was the end-all be-all of GOAT talk to top 5 list, then you would have to say Eli Manning is better than Tom Brady. Because in the 2 matchups they had against each other, Eli Manning beat him twice. So with that thought process and that logic, Eli is better than Tom Brady. And people want to look at, well, Jalen Hurts has outdueled Mahomes both times they've been in the Super Bowl. Great, that's 2 games. They have a 60 to 80 game sample size that you can look at, and you're going to look at 2 games just because they're the Super Bowl. Like, this goes beyond quarterback ranking. Like, ring talk, Super Bowl talk, championship talk has completely saturated how we evaluate individual players within the systems they're in. And that's why I wanted to bring up this conversation, is that while I think Jalen Hurts is a good player, and I like him as a person and as a player, I still don't think he's top 10 because of a few key areas that he has continuously struggled in over the past 3 years. So out of the 20 quarterbacks that are on this list, obviously you have the top 4. You have Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, and Josh Allen on that list. You also have a lot of guys who some would consider to be top 10, maybe top 5. Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy is up in these conversations now. Kyler Murray kind of floating around. Jared Goff is in those conversations. Like, a lot of those quarterbacks are on this list because they've played those past 3 years. We're not going to touch on Jaden Daniels, not going to touch on CJ Stroud, not going to touch on Jordan Love just because he didn't have the snap sample size to match this list. I think in 2022, he only threw the ball like 20-something times, so he's not even going to be eligible for this to begin with. Geno Smith is someone else entering top 10 conversation. So you're going to see a lot of those names on this list in terms of how we break down quarterback play. And the biggest thing I wanted to look at is how quarterbacks do against pressure versus no pressure, right? Because Jalen Hurts, having one of the best offensive lines, is not going to be pressured as much as some of these other quarterbacks. And if he is pressured, the blame's going to be more on him holding the ball too long rather than the offensive line giving up protection. And I think this just goes as a conversation in general, how we talk about, who's at fault for a quarterback getting sacked or pressured, right? Is it offensive line or is it quarterback? It's more so quarterback than it is offensive line. And it's usually with how they move in the pocket, how long they hold the ball, and how quick their trigger is. If they see something open, are they throwing it right away, or are they continuing their progression to find something else? And based on the numbers I've looked at in the film I watched, Jalen Hurts is a completely different quarterback under pressure than he is when he has a clean pocket. When he's under pressure, the majority of the time, not majority of the time, but the highest percentage of pressure fault over the past 3 years has lied with Jalen Hurts. Over 21% of his pressures were resulted because he held the ball too long or he drifted into pressure when one of his linemen had good pass protection. And I think the next closest was at like 17%, and that was Justin Herbert, which I completely rethought my entire viewpoint on Justin Herbert. So who I always thought was the number 5 quarterback the past 3 years. That's no longer the case since I've done this data. So this is not me picking on Jalen Hurts. This is my whole thinking of the quarterback position warped, because not the entire how I think of it, but like how I rank them has changed because of this. So just to throw some numbers at you, for the listeners at home and people that are watching, I'll try to keep this as simple and as digestible as possible. So if we look at dropback rate when someone was pressured, Jalen Hurts was 6th most often pressured when he was dropping back and getting pressured. That was at 36.61%. The quarterback just below him was Lamar Jackson at 36.31. The one right above was Brock Purdy, 37.04. Okay. Now we want to look at something called adjusted completion percentage against pressure. And this takes away drops, throwaways, quarterbacks that get hit when they release the ball, and if they're batted at the line of scrimmage. So it takes away any non-quarterback poor throws or good throws, right? If we look at adjusted completion rate, Jalen Hurts is 8th with 62.34%, which is pretty damn good in terms of adjusted completion rate. Pat Mahomes is right above him. Baker Mayfield is right below him. So good adjusted completion rate. When we look at yards per attempt against pressure, this is where I kind of go, because if we're looking at yards as the end-all be-all production, you have to look at it against pressure. And Jalen Hurts is 5th worst out of these 20 quarterbacks at 5.89 yards per attempt against pressure. Just above him is Justin Fields, 5.92. Just below him is Matt Stafford. So you're looking at Justin Fields, who most people would not consider top 20, and then you have Matt Stafford, who some people would consider top 5. He's right around that area. So you have that there. But I think that's the first alarming number I saw when I was looking at this. And I was like, okay, not great. Then we want to look at touchdowns against pressure. Okay. Jalen Hurts, his touchdown percentage against pressure was 12th out of these 20 quarterbacks. So just below the mid mark. And I want to say he was 4.43%. So just below him was Baker Mayfield, just above Pat Mahomes. So again, 2 good quarterbacks included in that conversation when they're pressured versus that. Next thing I want to go over is quarterback rating when pressured. And this is kind of the driving point home, is the difference from when he's pressured versus when he's not pressured. Okay. So if we look at QBR, because that's a lot of people look at that, that's the end-all be-all stat and their difference when they're pressured versus not. Okay. Jalen Hurts, when he is pressured over the past couple of years, his quarterback rating drops 24 points. That's a huge decline. We're looking at one of the best quarterbacks when he's not pressured. When he is pressured, he's one of the worst. His pressure QBR, or at least when he's pressured, drops all the way down. Let me get this number here, to 80.5. That's not getting it done in the NFL. If that was his QBR when he was pressured or not pressured, he wouldn't be in the league. That's his QBR when he is pressured. And guys that are around him, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, like these are quarterbacks who are not that good, right? And they struggle when they are pressured. Now, what works for Jalen is that most of the time, when it's not his fault, he's not getting pressured, right? If you take away the ones that are his fault, he's getting pressured less than 20% of the time, right? So, and there's a lot more to this spreadsheet, and I want to try to condense this as much as possible. But when you look at those main advanced metrics over this 3-year window of how quarterbacks do versus pressure versus not, Jalen Hurts doesn't step up to the challenge, and he doesn't step up to the plate in ways that other quarterbacks who are more consistently pressured do. Like Brock Purdy has the highest yards per attempt when he's pressured, and he's pressured more often than Jalen Hurts. So, like, just from a per throw basis, he's outperforming Jalen Hurts, and he's pressured more often. And a lot of people point out, oh, well, he had George Kittle, he had Debo, he had Brandon Ayuk. He has a good defense. His offensive line sucks outside of Trent Williams, and this past year, Dominic Pooney, who was a rookie. So just like I said earlier, small sample size, we can't say if he's really good yet or not. He had a good rookie year. There are quarterbacks who everyone laughs at that are better in these situations, and they're in these situations more often, right? So I don't think we can pinpoint look at, like, if we look at macro stats, Jalen Hurts isn't even top 10 in yardage over the past couple of years as a passer, right? Like, let me pull up that number. If we look at total yards passing over the past, 3 years I had? Oh, where is my yards? I know I have it on here somewhere. Give me 1 second. If you look at the 3-year total based on yards, come on, where do I have it? I know I have it somewhere. Forget it. Either way. But he's not top 10 in yards over the past 3 years out of the same group of quarterbacks. So if he can't even do the basic stat to a high level, right? I know stats aren't everything, and I'm the first one to say that. But he's not productive from a stat standpoint. And when you look analytically, he's struggling in the places where if he was in any other position, he would be struggling as well. It's hard for me to say he's a top 10 quarterback. Is he a top 10 talent? I will say he's a top 10 talent. Between the speed, between how he layers his throws, he has a better arm than people think, because they look at that one throw in the Chiefs game when he stepped on someone and the ball fell 20 yards short of the target. Everyone's like, oh, he doesn't have a strong arm. If you look at that go-ahead touchdown to put the game away in the fourth quarter, when he hits Devontae Smith over the middle of the field on that deep seam or deep post, like, he throws that 40 yards with ease off his back foot. Like, he is a good quarterback. That's my main takeaway from this. Do I think he's top 10? No. And with that being said, Justin Herbert, I don't think is top 10 anymore either, just based on the data I found, because he struggles even worse against pressure. Now, he's asked to do a lot more in terms of the offense he plays in, because Jalen Hurts is in shotgun 99.9% of the snaps outside of the tush pushes, right? So his eyes are constantly on the defense. He's not turning his back to the defense when he's running play action. He is not being asked to go under center nearly as often as Justin Herbert has in his career. And this is a quarterback who's exclusively shotgun his entire college career. So when you put all that together and you look at the 20 quarterbacks that we have on this list, like Kyler Murray, I wouldn't even consider top 15 on this list. Like, and I love Kyler. Talent-wise, I think he's top 5. But in terms of what we've seen from him and what he's done with it, he's not even top 15 for me. Who I would put at number 5, if we want to do top 5, right? Mahomes number 1, Lamar number 2, Josh Allen 3, Joe Burrow 4. I think everyone in that order agrees that's the top 4. If we want to see who the 5th best quarterback in the NFL is, and I know his pressure number, his yards per attempt pressure number wasn't great, but Matt Stafford is fantastic against pressure outside of that yards per attempt number. Wow. And I think Matt Stafford's been great, and he's been great for a long time. And he's dealt with injuries, which has kind of peeled back the layer of his quarterback play a little bit, but he's still firing on all cylinders. And if he can get over this back injury he's going through in camp, and we'll get into that during the Rams episode, but he is awesome. Against pressure, not against pressure. He carried that team to Super Bowl in 2021. Granted, that defense was really good, but he, especially in the second half, really turned it on and carried that team. That's a quarterback I would not want to start a franchise with, but if I had to put someone in the worst situation possible, I'm considering Matt Stafford before I'm ever even thinking about Jalen Hurts in that conversation. And I think that's kind of what it comes to. If you put all the quarterbacks on a level playing field, who are my top 10 guys? Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray are not touching that list. Guys like Matt Stafford, Jared Goff, Geno Smith. Those are guys I'm putting up above those guys in conversation.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a long, convoluted way to say I don't think he's top 10 overall. I think he's a top 10 talent, but not as a quarterback in today's NFL.
Yeah. If we can get a number, ballpark.
Yes.
Top 15?
Yes. I would say 11 or 12 for sure.
Got it.
Like I would definitely say he's about to break in, but the year when he had the least amount of help, which was 2023, when he had a horrible OC, the defense sucked, and he didn't have his weapons weren't being utilized the way they were this past season. That was his worst season in the NFL outside of his rookie year when he only played 5 or 6 games, right? Or at least started 5 or 6 games. So if you want to look at any year, look at 2023. That's who Jalen Hurts is as quarterback. And is anyone going to take 2023 Jalen Hurts? No. To start a franchise, no one's going to take that, except Eagles fans who probably clicked off this, video by now or audio by now, right? Like they already stopped listening. But most people would not take 2023 Jalen Hurts. So why 1 year later, when he had a much better supporting cast and an NFL offense that was functional, why is he all of a sudden now in top 5? That's just where I'm at. And I think it's recency bias, ring culture, not looking at the nitty-gritty stats like this and deep diving into what the story is of that offense. And even if you take the rushing numbers, right? He has 42 rushing touchdowns over the past 3 years. How many do you think are non-tush-push rushing touchdowns?
Out of 23?
Out of 42 touchdowns.
Out of 43 touchdowns?
Yeah.
32.
He had 15 non-tush-push touchdowns. Out of the 42. That's just 40% of his rushing touchdowns were not tush-push. Like, wow. That's the biggest thing when people are like, oh, he's a great rusher. Yeah, he is, but that's not why they're scoring. Like, so that's all I can say to that. I know we have a lot more teams to get through. That's going to be the bulk of this episode. And we can kind of sprint through the rest of this, but that was like the big point I wanted to bring up today was Jalen Hurts top 10. I don't think so. So people can stop listening if they want, but that's just my take.
But a quarterback outside the top 10, still enough to make the Eagles a Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah. So I don't think Kyler Murray's top 15. I still think he's a good quarterback. But after about the top 20, the talent dips off. And again, this is taking out Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, those types of QBs who have done good things. There's just not a big sample size yet.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I wanted to move into a player that you listed as a dark horse potential for the Eagles this year, and that is defensive tackle Moro Ojomo.
Yes.
What about this guy do you feel like could get the Eagles? I mean, I guess it's kind of weird to get them to the next level, but because they've already won the Super Bowl, but continue that championship pedigree. Even after, again, we talked about a lot of their losses are focused on the defensive side of the ball. So how does that balance? How does Ojomo balance those losses out?
Absolutely. And I think it's his pass rush. I think this is one of the most underrated and under-talked pass rushers in the NFL, especially as a defensive lineman. So I broke down his numbers from week 13 into the Super Bowl because that's when he really came alive. And I think taking the postseason stretch into account is massive because he went against some really good offensive lines. The Rams' interior offensive line, the Commanders' offensive line was actually sneaky good last year. The Buccaneers' offensive line is decent, and the Chiefs have the best interior unit in the league. And I just wanted to talk about his numbers from week 13 and going up until the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl, right? So out of 42 defensive tackles with 125 pass rush snaps, he was third in total pressure rate, first in total pressure rate against true pass sets, so not play action, not RPO, not screens, true drop back passes. He was first in total pressure rate, which was nearly 25%. He was second amongst defensive tackles in pass rush win rate and first in pass rush win rate against true pass sets, which was over 30%. So 3 out of 10 snaps, he's beating his guy in true pass rush. That's elite. Like, that's astronomical and absolutely absurd for a backup to do that. Then there's a metric called pass rush production by PFF, it heavily skewed towards sacks, and Moro Ojomo did not have a lot of sacks. But even if we take this number, he was third amongst defensive tackles with an 8.4, and he was seventh in true pass rush situations in pass rush production with 12.2. Anything over 10, you're looking at really good territory. And so to have 12.2 as a DT in true pass rush situations is awesome. So really good. A couple of the numbers I wanted to highlight over the course of the entire regular season. He was 11th in pressure rate and pressure rate against true pass sets over the course of the entire year. And he was second in pass rush win rate and third in pass rush win rate against true pass sets. So even if you take the full course of the year when he wasn't that good in the beginning of the year, we're still looking at a top 10 DT in terms of pressure rate and pass rush win rate, which is a much better storyteller of how good you are at pass rush rather than looking at sacks. Because, and we'll get into this in the Rams episode, but Jared Verse had half the sacks Braden Fisk has. Who is the better pass rusher? Jared Verse. He's the reason why Braden Fisk got so many one-on-ones and easy matchups. We'll get into that in the Rams episode or the NFC West episode. But like as we see here, he was better than Milton Williams in a lot of these categories. So they're not going to feel the loss of Milton as a pass rusher as much. Now, there are areas in the run defense he has to get better at, but that's why they have Jordan Davis, who is a damn good run defender in the NFL. His pass rush isn't great, but he's a damn good run defender. And I think that's going to keep pressure off of Moro when he comes in for his, 400 to 500 snaps this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think they'll really feel the loss of Milton. I think Moro is more than ready and capable to take on those pass rush snaps and be a rotational DT in the rundowns.
And so for the Eagles, I feel like, 10 years ago, the question of, what does this team need to do to repeat? It was kind of a formality because we never really saw it too much. I mean, we've seen it up, in 2015, I would say we saw it once in our lifetimes when the Patriots went back to back, but it was really kind of seen as a fluke. But the Eagles stopped a potential three-peat.
Yes.
So I feel like it's not as ridiculous of a question as it was a long time ago. So I'm going to ask it now. What do the Eagles need to do to repeat as Super Bowl champions?
The offense needs to take the next step, and Jalen Hurts needs to show that I'm wrong. He needs to prove me wrong and prove himself right first and foremost. Like, he needs to show, well, I've shown flashes of good passing. Now I need to attack all levels of the football. I need to be more decisive with my throws. I need to anticipate throws better and not drift into pressure. If he can do two of those four things I mentioned, this offense is going to elevate, because guess what? Teams are going to hunker down against the run even more than last year. So Jalen Hurts is going to have to show off with his arm what he can do. And I think he can do it. He just hasn't done it to the level that people are talking about as a top 5, top 10 quarterback. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. He needs to do it this year. And if he does that and elevates his offense, one, I will gladly put him in top 5, top 10 conversations. And number two, this team will win a Super Bowl again, as long as the defense holds up its end of the deal like it did last year. If this is a top half of the league defense, there's no reason why they can't go to the Super Bowl again, even with all the pieces they lost defensively. Because guess what? They have guys waiting in the wings to show off. Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith is going to be one of the best edge combos for the next 2 to 3 years if they take the steps that they did throughout the playoff run. His pass rush interior is not going to lose any juice because of Moro Ojomo, like I just said. Zach Bond is going to be awesome again as a linebacker. And whether it's Jihad Campbell or Nakobe Dean next to him or a mix, they're going to be fine. And the secondary, as long as cornerback 2 does not diminish the play of this defense is going to be top 10 again going into 2025.
Absolutely. And let's move on and talk about the team that gave him a little bit of a threat in the NFC Championship game. Not too much, though, as they, Philly went by them by a margin of 32, 55-23. But look, up until that point, I mean, this team was on a fantastic playoff run, and that is the Washington Commanders. After probably like 6 to 7 years of like irrelevance outside of that 2020 season where they kind of made a fluke playoff run. They played in like a game, but after, kind of being a bottom feeder in the NFL for several years, they came in with Jaden Daniels. They took down the Buccaneers, a Baker Mayfield-led Buccaneers team that was just fantastic. Then they took down the number 1 seed, Detroit, 45-31. And then in the game against the Eagles, it kind of felt like they got in their own way in a lot of ways, especially on some of those 3 consecutive. I think it was 3 consecutive, right? Push attempts that resulted in penalties. They kind of crashed out a little bit.
Yeah,
but that happens with young teams. We see that in pretty much every sport, right? These young teams, they get to a certain point, and then their inexperience overshadows the talent that's on that team. But now they're coming back. They've had another full offseason to kind of learn from their mistakes. Jaden Daniels, he continues to develop. So for you in Washington, what is going to be the main focal point for this Commanders team?
I think tampering expectations. This was a good team last year. Do I think they were the 12-5 team that they ended up becoming at the end of the year? I believe they went 12-5, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. 11-6, whatever they were. I don't think they were. The wins matched the talent that was on this team, and mainly because this defense was so damn bad. And I think, and this is why I brought it up. I didn't include Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud in those top conversations, right? Because CJ Stroud, everyone and their mother said that was a top 5 rookie season, and he was already top 10 quarterback, maybe pushing top 5. And then this past season was under a lot of pressure consistently. His receivers weren't healthy all year long. The defense was better, but not as effective. Thank you. I am right, as always. Never wrong, just early. So with that point, with Jaden Daniels, we might see that sophomore slump drop off that we see with a lot of top ballot or top pedigree quarterbacks early on in their career, right? And it's not that, look, Jaden Daniels is incredibly talented, and my evaluation on him, even though I still had him as a top 50 player, was wrong, because there were things I saw in his college game that he was missing stuff that is heavily used in the NFL, namely throwing over the middle of the field at all levels, over the middle, short, deep, and middle, right? Or intermediate area. And there wasn't a whole lot of that on this tape. So I said, you know what? I don't know if he can do it, because I didn't see him do it. Lo and behold, he became one of the most accurate quarterbacks over the middle of the field this year, because that's where this offense was targeting defenses. And if you can hit over the middle of the field in the NFL, you're going to be a damn good quarterback for a long time. There are guys who do exclusively hit the outsides, like Russell Wilson, and has had a long and decent career, but that doesn't work for everyone. The data lies who can hit over the middle of the field. Jaden Daniels proved he can do that. I'll take the L. He's a good quarterback. But I think we might see a drop in play from him this year, especially with the Terry McLaurin talks that we're having, right? Like, Is he going to get extended? Is he going to get traded? More often than not, and this is the vast majority of the time, guys that take this route of, I want to trade, they get a deal 2 or 3 weeks later, if not sooner, right? Mm-hmm. He's going to get extended. But that's still time he's missing in camp, building that relationship with Jaden Daniels. That's other guys who are playing out of their normal wide receiver position, because you have to assume he's not going to be on the roster. So now you have guys who normally are Z playing the X position, guys who were normally in the slot playing Z, guys that aren't normally getting snaps. Like, it messes with the mojo, right? So I think, number one, that's going to be the biggest hang up. Number two, now teams have a full year of NFL film on him, and they've been reviewing it since January. They know what they want to do to attack Jaden Daniels and get him off platform and off pressure. And I think what we saw was when he went and played these tougher defenses, especially the Eagles the second time around when Jalen Hurts didn't get hurt in the very early stages of the game, he struggled, especially when they were just sitting back in quarters and saying, you need to read this out and you need to figure it out, and our pass rush is going to get to you before you have a chance to. We saw that play drop down, and he struggled heavily in that first half against the Eagles. He did great against the Lions because all they were running was man coverage, and they had the weapons to get past man coverage. Teams will now say, okay, we're going to play more zone against these guys, which is also going to help them keeping him in the pocket, because now their eyes aren't on the receivers, they're on the quarterback. So they'll react to him running faster. So I think more teams are going to play zone against this team than they did last year. And I think that's where, not where he's going to struggle against, but that's where the pitfalls of this offense are going to start to come through. And teams will start blitzing with zone. Teams will start running more stunts with zone. And that's what's going to bring him back a little bit. And that's what's going to limit this Commanders team from doing as well as they were last year. And the bigger piece of that is the defense. There's more question marks on defense this year than last year. And that defense was, on paper, worse. They bring in Von Miller, who is not Von Miller anymore. He is a shell of himself, let alone a shell of any rotational pass rusher in the NFL. They bring in Marshawn Lattimore, but what the hell are they doing with the safety group? They are still leaning on Bobby Wagner, who a lot of people still consider top 10, but he's one of the biggest liabilities in coverage as a linebacker in the NFL. Frankie Louvu didn't take that step that I thought he was going to take. So it's like, what is this defense's identity? And can this offense overcome everyone having more film and more preparation against Jaden Daniels? I'm not sure. I don't think they're going to be as good as last year. And I think the record may not totally reflect that. They may go 10-7 or 11-6. So people say, oh, they lost 2 gimme games. But I think from an efficiency standpoint, both sides of the football are going to be worse off.
Yeah. One question for you to offer maybe a little bit of a bright spot for Commanders fans.
Yes.
Because, I wouldn't say your evaluation there was negative. It's just a little foreboding of not even a potential of a little bit of a drop off, but also just, the worst thing as a fan, in my opinion, is when you have a team that kind of has a breakout season, and then what happens is what you just described is probably going to happen for Commanders' opponents is they're going to get better along with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they know how you work now, and so it's going to be tougher for you to do the things that made you so great successful. Yeah. But if I can offer a bright spot to Commanders fans, if we're looking at their schedule and their upcoming opponents based on their pass defense from 2024.
Yeah.
This is based on their EPA / dropback rate, when they face each other.
Yeah, and this was based on where they were last year when they played these guys. So this isn't looking forward for 2025. This is just based on 2024 when they played them and the type of defenses Jaden Daniels saw, right? Yeah. That's where this lies. So finish your question. I just wanted to preface that.
So I'm just curious, as the schedule went on last year, though, you saw a little bit of an improvement. I mean, they were going up against, weaker teams in the beginning of the season. And then they were kind of, when they hit that really strong pocket, against the Bears, the Steelers, the Eagles, they were going up against successful pass defenses and they were winning games.
Yes.
So for you, I mean, especially now as the season goes on, you mentioned the struggles with Terry McLaurin. So in training camp, but that will kind of get brushed off as the season goes on. If they get off to a rough start, how much do you feel like fans should be confident that they'll kind of pick it back up and still get into the playoffs?
Number one answer is Jaden Daniels, because he's still a hell of an athlete. He can run the shit out of the ball. He has a really good deep ball, right? So if they start to hit bumps in the road, I think the Commanders and the fans can lean on Jaden to lead this team, because he did it last year, obviously. Like, even with all the question marks, like Cliff Kingsbury coming back as an OC after running some inefficient offenses with the Cardinals, and USC taking back offensively his 1 year there. Then you look at, can this offensive line fit the bill? Can this defense show up to play? Can Dan Quinn be a good head coach and rewrite the ship and not have what happened with the Cowboys happen here, right? Like, that's what he has to. That's what they had to work through last year, and they overcame all of that, right? And so now they have that identity of Jalen Daniels is a dog, and we can lean on him to win games. The defense does not have to be nearly as good as we want it to be in order to compete. The offensive line exceeded expectations, right? So I think even with all the question marks about, okay, Terry McLaurin, what's his deal? Is he going to re-sign or is he going to get traded? This defense improved and also didn't improve on paper, but there's still a lot of question marks. Can they come to the plate again? And can Dan Quinn out-scheme other people? Can this run game be effective at all? Can it be? And we'll get into that with my dark horse candidate later on. But I think with who Jaden Daniels played last year and did well against some good defenses, did well against bad defense, and had some bad games against good defenses and had bad games against bad ones. He has shown the normal ebbs and flows of an NFL quarterback. And I think now with a year under his belt and being more prepared to see different defenses, which he's going to see this year because teams are going to run a hell of a lot more zone than they did man against them last year, he's going to have to show up and step up to the plate. Now, still another big question mark for me is Cliff Kingsbury was super creative and innovative his first 2 years with the Cardinals. After that, teams knew how to play Kyler Murray, so the offense got a lot more horizontal, and it wasn't as explosive. Is that going to happen with Cliff? Because they're running zone, they're not going to be able to hit them deep nearly as much as they did when they played when defenses played man against them. So is he going to keep running those same style plays and keep the pressure on the defense, or is he going to revert to being horizontal and now the defense is running downhill the whole game and you don't have an offense? I hope that's not the case because I do like Cliff. I think he's a good OC, and that was proven last year. They were one of the most efficient offenses in the league in his first year as an exclusive OC. So I think it's a lot of similar questions, but I think it's now instead of, okay, this is going to be a rebuilding year. Now the expectation is playoffs. Now Jaden Daniels needs to step up once again. And that's going to be the positive highlight is that you have a great quarterback like him. And number two, a lot of the things that were question marks last year ended up working themselves out. And that could again happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to get into their dark horse. A really interesting dark horse candidate that you picked, especially because, his area of expertise is something where Washington excelled in last year, and that's rushing. They were third in the league in overall rush yards, right behind the Ravens and the Eagles in 2024 in the regular season. But your dark horse is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the running back. You really love his tape in camp. You loved when he played at New Mexico. What can you tell us about this guy? Because, he's not really a name that you hear a lot in upcoming players. But for you, what did you like from this guy's tape?
He is just so damn elusive for his size. And just to give a brief overview about Ja'Cory, so he started, I want to say it was at Alabama he got a start. It was either Alabama or Alabama State, one of the two, with big difference between them, but still. So his freshman year, he knew he was going to transfer out. So he was giving his number to one of the other freshmen that he knew was going to stay. So he gave them his number. As it was never recorded, and this was before the season even started. He never played in the number that was listed on his roster. So when they looked at the tape, they said, "Oh, well, you," and he was redshirted that year. So Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was redshirted. But when they looked at the number and then they saw the number was playing in games, they said, well, you obviously played in games. So even though it says you're redshirted, we saw you playing games, even though it wasn't him. How this even happened and became a thing is beyond me, but essentially lost his red shirt and only played one game his senior year when he was at Arizona. And he had a damn good game. So he can't play his senior year and he declares for the draft. Gets invited to the Shrine Bowl, wins Shrine Bowl MVP. Thank you, Alabama State, New Mexico, and then Arizona. Thank you. So, and again, because it's Alabama State, they're not going to really pay that much attention and they're not going to care about it as much as they would in SEC school. Sorry, that's just the reality of the NCAA. They're not a well-run machine, especially for the FCS and lower programs. So he goes to New Mexico, looks really good in New Mexico, transfers to Arizona, lights it up his first game. Gets suspended for the rest of the year. He says, screw it, I'm just going to go prepare for the draft. Goes to the Shrine Bowl, does great there. It's his hands, his elusiveness. He's a bigger bodied back than most other running backs in the NFL. Not most of the other running backs, but the majority, because now running backs are like 200, 210. He's sitting around 215, I want to say. So he can run through you, run around you. He's got great speed, great and like skills as a pass catcher. And that's something that, like, even as good as this rush offense was last year, they were missing the explosive element. And that's because Brian Robinson is a downhill running back. Austin Eckler is their receiving back and doesn't really have the burst that he used to. So you bring in a bursty guy who can weave between tackles and hit a breakaway on the outside on a toss or an outside zone like Jacory, that opens up the offense. So I think he's not going to get a lot of reps early on his rookie year, but I think in the back half of his rookie year, especially if there's an injury, he's going to be the guy getting the bulk of carries. And not that he's going to get 20 carries a game, but I think he'll get 12 to 15, and they're all going to be meaningful and impactful, and they're going to drive this offense. And I think if this was a guy who was able to play at Arizona, we're looking at someone who's a day 2 pick. I don't think he's in the same class as Ashton Genty, Travion Henderson, Omarion Hampton. I don't think he's at that level, but he was definitely, I thought he was better than Caleb Johnson. I thought he was better than Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Damian Martinez, a lot of other good running backs in this class that I really liked. I thought he was better than them. And it sucked that we were robbed of a really good senior season because it looked like he was going to pop off. And if the Shrine Bowl is any case, he's going against the best players in the country that are going to the draft, and he won the Shrine Bowl MVP for someone that didn't play any college football his senior year. That speaks volumes to me.
And so the burning question for the Washington Commanders, was last season a fluke? Obviously, we cannot say yes or no. It was a fluke or it wasn't a fluke because it is August 10th when we're recording this. Oh. But I guess the better burning question is, can the Commanders prove that last season was not a fluke by their play in 2025?
Yes, I absolutely believe they can prove that it was not a fluke. Will that come to fruition? Obviously, we'll wait and see. But if Jaden Daniels takes a step forward and can prove he can beat more of these zone-heavy teams and match-heavy teams, if the run offense can be, more dynamic rather than totally being dominant and be more dynamic and add another layer to the run offense, I think that's a good starting point. The offensive line needs to be on par with where they were last year, and the defense needs to be better. And if those, like I said earlier, if 2 of those 4 things happen, I think we're going to be looking at a better team than last year, and it's not going to be a fluke. The record might not show that, but I think they can be a better team in total standpoint rather than record, be better. But I think there's still the amount of question marks is the same as last year, and I don't think that naturally bodes well for success in repeated success. Yep. So I think they will take a step back, but I still think they can be a playoff team in 2025.
Great. And now let's move on to one of their most bitter in-division rivals, the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. The Dallas Cowboys are coming off a season in which they finished 7-10, breaking a 3-year streak of consecutive 12-5 seasons. However, 3 consecutive 12-5 seasons is really good. Like, I don't want to understate that achievement. But for Cowboys fans, I think the bigger focus is that in each of those 3 seasons, they never made it out of the division round. If we want to keep going further, they have not made it out of the divisional round since 1995 when they won the Super Bowl. It's, probably the most talked about topic in the NFL, probably our whole lives, right? Mm-hmm. What can the Cowboys do to, get over the hump and be America's team once again? I feel like it seems like they've continued to make moves that they think are the answer to that. But once they get on onto the field, whether it be through injury concerns or, as we've seen recently, players just kind of not happy with the franchise. Like, it's just something is not working in Dallas, and it seems like no one really has the answer. But we're going to figure it out right now. Yep. So for you, Jordan, could the answer to why the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl in nearly 30 years be its owner, the guy that kind of brought them to that last Super Bowl, in Jerry Jones?
I would say so, absolutely. And I think the most glaring piece of evidence you can point to is Jimmy Johnson won 2 straight Super Bowls, and he canned him because he wasn't getting enough credit for it. Imagine winning a Super Bowl and you get canned. And you won 2, and you got canned after that. So, and the handshake, in football world, we talk about the handshake between the coach and the GM needs to be strong. And Jerry Jones being the GM of that team, you also need a strong handshake with him. And unfortunately, when you're a damn good coach, he's not going to like that handshake because his ego is too big. And I think you see that ego is too big, especially when it comes to the Micah Parsons conversations, some of the other contract disputes that they've had over the past several years. And you just look at their Super Bowl success, which has been 0 in the past 30 years, right? I think another piece to that I want to look at is he cares more about publicity than he does winning, at least in my viewpoint. Because if people are putting in dollars to the Cowboys and the stadium's being sold out and they're the most talked about team in the media, that's success to Jerry Jones because he's worried about this rather than wins. And for the listeners at home, I'm rubbing my hands together for money, right? Like he cares way more about making sure that his team is talked about than winning Super Bowls. And that was evident, especially last offseason. This team had a lot of holes they needed to fill, and they brought in 2 free agents, one of which is an overrated linebacker that got massively exposed last year in Eric Kendricks, right? But he was a fit with Mike Zimmer, who's the DC, right? That's another conversation. But I think that kind of alludes to who Jerry Jones is. It's been 30 years since they won a Super Bowl, and they were America's team at one point. We know why they've fallen by the wayside in the NFL. And yeah, they've been competitive and successful, but that's out of spite. Imagine if they had Jeff Lurie or Howie Roseman running this team, or Eric DeCosta of the Ravens running this team, right? Like, this is a completely different franchise. They probably win 1 or 2 Super Bowls since Dak has taken over. They probably win 1 or 2 with Tony Romo running the system, right? Like, if Jerry Jones is not there, they get a lot more of their needs addressed. They take care of a lot of the bullshit that you see with the NFL and getting blown up in the media. A lot of that is subdued and is not nearly as talked about. Micah Parsons would have gotten his deal in February rather than still sitting here dealless and not participating in camp and demanding a trade. And that's the biggest thing with him. He sits on his hands. He waits to pay his guys that should be getting paid a year earlier than they are. And then he plays victim when he was like, well, this isn't how we did it back in my day. Well, guess what, Jerry? It's not 1995 anymore. It's 2025. Guys need to get paid what they're worth. The people are too smart now. And there's and this is a whole nother, but like where the economy is and where we're at socially, like people, like they want to be paid and they want security. And that's consistent from professional athletes all the way to people working in grocery stores and fast food restaurants. Like people just want to be paid and they want to survive and live in this country, right? Like the same goes for the NFL athletes. Yeah, they're making millions upon millions of dollars, and some people argue get paid too much, but they're the ones putting people in the seats, so they should be getting paid for it. That's the value they're bringing. So when you have an owner that wants to sit back and just be like, oh, well, woe is me, they don't want to be here, like they're asking for too much money, they wouldn't be asking for that much if you friggin' paid them when you should have. Like, and that's just the Cowboys' biggest hang up is the Jones family. If another person buys the Cowboys, which I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but when that does, the Cowboys are going to go back to being successful as long as the owner just writes checks and sits back and just watches his team be successful. Those are the best owners in the NFL, and unfortunately the Cowboys have the exact opposite of that.
So my question to you is, so you bring up the fact that, it seems like Jerry Jones only really cares about the money. And when you look at the data, I mean, I'm looking at Forbes right now as of the 2024 season, their sports team valuations. If you look at from 2015 to 2024, they went from being valued at $4 billion, the Cowboys, in 2015, to, as of 2024, being valued at $10.1 billion. That's more than a 2.5 times increase in value in just a decade. Let alone for how long Jerry Jones is on the team, going all the way back to 1989, right? So if you're saying that Jerry Jones is focused on the money, he's pretty successful at being focused on the money, right? This team is still a cash cow, no matter how well or how poor they do on the field, right? That being said, as much as that's, enough of a reason for Jerry Jones to still hold on to the team, he's still making money. He's still increasing his, net worth with it. I don't think that Jerry Jones doesn't care about winning, right? I don't think he's like, they can go 0-17, but as long as I get another $500 million every season, that's fine with me. I just think that he only cares about winning the way he wants to win. And like you said, it's not 1995 anymore. He can't do that. So if the money is still coming in and he's not convinced yet that the way that he wants to win is still an impossible way to win, what do you think it will take for Jerry Jones to crack? And by crack, I there's a wide range of things. That could be he just changes his philosophy, takes a smaller role in the team, and remains the owner. And lets kind of other people have more control. Or on the extreme end, he just lets the team go and sells it, and a new ownership group takes over. So, what do you think? It would take for any of those things to happen?
Their star players need to not play and hold out.
Yeah,
that's besides Jerry Jones dropping dead. That is the only way this problem gets fixed with the Jones family and with what's going on, right? Because and I don't mean to sound as harsh as I did there, but really, that's the only other alternative. That you have two possibilities, because what has been happening, athletes have taken the route that's normally taken and demand a trade, ask for money, ask an extension, and it's been getting handled since 2002. Jerry Jones has been folding and giving them way more than what their worth is, or they end up getting traded the following offseason, right? That's what happens. So that's been happening, and Jerry Jones is still accumulating immense value for this franchise and this organization. So Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, Tyler Smith, they all need to say, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to sit out this year. And I don't know if they're going to have the fortitude to do that, because you're giving it, all of them would be giving up a lot of money to do that. But you've already made millions. You already made a shit ton of money. If you really don't like the owner, you have to piss him off somehow. That's the only way this gets fixed, because his ego will either get too high and he'll get rid of you, or he'll realize, shit, I probably should pay them, and he will. But then it's already too late, and now you're spending exorbitant amount of money at these positions. Now you can't build depth, which is the Cowboys' biggest issue right now, is their depth. So with that, how do you force him to change his way of thinking? You have to do something that's never been done in the NFL. All your star players sit down and say, yeah, the backups could play. And then the Cowboys will go 3-14, and it will be the worst record they've had since pre-Tony Romo. So then you're like, okay, I have to do something else. I have to pay guys earlier. And unfortunately, I don't think Jerry Jones will ever do that. And that's why I said he's going to have to drop dead. But then Stephen Jones is taking his place, and he's not any better, and he's younger. So it's the end-all be-all for the Cowboys to finally get back to the Super Bowl is the Joneses have to be bought out. Whether by someone, a group of people like we saw with the Commanders buying out Dan Snyder and taking the team from him, and now they're looking so much better, long-term projection just in one season. That's what's going to have to happen with the Cowboys.
Yeah. I mean, not only would a 3-14 season be the worst season the Cowboys have seen pre-Tony Romo, it'd be the worst season they've seen I guess not counting the first season that Jerry Jones was the owner, but it'd be the worst season that they've seen since Jerry Jones was took over owner, which was 1-15 in 1989, and then they were 3-13 in '88 the year before. So yeah, very interesting. But I don't want to sound like a Cowboys fan, which it's kind of like the meme. This is our year meme, but it seems like if they want to turn it around, they do have a chance to start this year with the offense, right? Like you said in the pregame notes that you sent over, this could be one of the best receiving corps that Dak Prescott has had in his career with the Cowboys. And we've seen years where he's had some good guys to throw to, and we've seen years where he's been it seems like he's been ready to go, and then something happens. Obviously, there were years where he's gotten hurt. There were years where things were just not clicking. But for you, what about this current receiving corps will be enough for the Cowboys to get into the playoffs and kind of shirk off, 30 years worth of woes?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that CeeDee Lamb is going to be able to play in the role that he's best suited for rather than having to wear multiple different hats. And that's why I think it's the best receiving core they've had, because when it was CeeDee and Michael Gallup, Gallup was the deep threat, but he wasn't an X-style receiver that could beat a press DB off the line of scrimmage. So CeeDee had to become that guy and get moved out of the slot, which is where that's where he excels. Like CeeDee's a very good receiver from the slot, right? So we had to move out of there, and that kind of condensed the offense and didn't allow them to be as effective. Now you bring in someone like George Pickens, who can be a DB off the line of scrimmage in press, is a good deep threat, can also be a yak threat over the middle of the field. That's just going to open up the layers of the offense. So just adding George Pickens, who I don't think is a top receiver in this league, but he has a top skill set and a multiple skill set of what he can win and how he wins as a receiver. And now you're not asking him to be the number one guy. You're asking him to be number two to CeeDee Lamb, who they're going to plug and play in the slot and put wherever they want. Now that opens up that. And now you just need one or two guys to take over the middle of the field and hit the short routes that when CeeDee and George Pickens aren't running them. And I think either Jalen Tolbert or Ryan Flournoy are very good at that. And at worst, if neither of them step up, you have Jake Ferguson coming back from injury. And he took a step back last year because of it, but I think he's going to come in full tilt to 2025 and kind of see what we saw from him in 2023, where he is getting hit over the middle of the field. He's one of the best seam runners in the NFL out of the true wide tight end position. And I think with how much the outsides are going to be just blanketed with George Pickens there, CeeDee running outs, corners, and flats, like, they're going to have to worry about the outside. The middle is going to open right up for Jake Ferguson. And guess what? If they play deep in the middle, guess who's coming underneath? Jalen Tolbert or Ryan Flournoy or some other third receiver that could shock us and come out of nowhere this year. That's why I think it's the best receiving core he's had. It's because of the versatility and skill sets rather than having specific guys for specific roles. Now, can Brian Schottenheimer use them to the way I think he can? Maybe. But again, we'll see how that goes when we get to October, November.
Yeah. And so Dak Prescott, he's pretty comfortable right now. I mean, he's extended through the 2028 season. Obviously, he signed a pretty big extension about a year or two back. For you, like, what is Dak? What do you want to see out of just Dak specifically?
I'm not sure if there's anything more I can see in terms of what he can do to elevate his game, because I think we've seen the best of Dak, and Dak is the best that he's ever going to be based on his talent. He can hit any level of the field, as we've seen. He can command this offense, and like, people give him a lot of shit about the interceptions he throws and when he throws them. But if you look at the tape, a lot of those are drops to the receiver's hands. There's something called option routes in the NFL that are used heavily. So someone will run a post instead of running a dig. So Dak will anticipate the dig and will throw it short. And when the guy is running behind a DB instead of in front, so like that becomes an issue. So I think what he needs to do is just minimize the mistakes and build better chemistry with his receivers. And again, I think the connection between him and CeeDee is strong. The connection between him and Ferguson is strong. If he can hit the ground running with George Pickens, that's really going to help. And then they'll find a fourth option somewhere, like whether that's Tolbert or Flournoy, another receiver, or even one of the many running backs that they have, whether it's Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, maybe Deuce Vaughn finally breaks out. Everyone loved Deuce Vaughn because, 5'5" and super efficient runner. How can you not? But as long as they can find a fourth option and he mitigates his mistakes or just mitigates the risky plays he takes on option routes, that's how he can, quote unquote, step up. Like, I don't think there's any more room for growth for him as a quarterback outside of mitigating mistakes. Like, he's shown he can hit any level of the field. He's shown he can rip a seam or layer a pass over a DB and underneath the safety, right? Like, he can do it all. And I think he just gets a bad rep because he's Dak Prescott and plays for the Cowboys. And they suck in the playoffs, which, yeah, he isn't great in playoffs, at least what we've seen so far. But again, that's more, I think playoff success is just getting there is more team-oriented rather than one or two players carrying you there, as we've seen over the past several seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving into their dark horse, defensive lineman, Marshawn Nealand. We talked a lot about, the offense, but defensively, where does Nealand kind of elevate this Cowboys defensive line?
As long as they bring Micah Parsons back, I think he fills the shoes of DeMarcus Lawrence. They're similar body types, they're similar builds, similar play styles where they're just going to stuff you in the run game and then not be the premier pass rusher, but win often enough that you have to worry about more guys than one, right? And I'm going to butcher his last name, so I'm just going to say his first name. But they have Osa on the inside, who is, like Moro Ojomo, very efficient as a pass rusher, doesn't have the sack numbers to back it up, but high pressure rate, high pass rush win rate in all situations. So I think they already have those two to worry about. Now, Marshawn Nealand just needs to be that power edge and move inside in true pass rush situations and go alongside Osa. He's someone that I think they don't miss a step if he progresses the way I think he can progress, because he's just a big body defensive end, which this defense needs that. Like, even if DeMarcus Lawrence was still there, like, they need a big body edge who can be a spell guy, or if they just want to stuff the run and give Micah a break to come in and do that, right? Like, that's what Marshawn can bring to this team. And I think he's a dark horse because he's not being talked about, and he's slated to be the starter. He's going to lose some of those edge reps in pass rush to Dante Flower and Donovan Aruzaraku, but having him in there as the starting edge and moving inside, that's going to be his best use, I think. And that's something DeMarcus didn't really bring as a defensive end.
And so my burning question, or, our burning question for the Cowboys heading into 2025 is, when looking at Dak Prescott's stats over his entire career, last season did not set the record for most amount of times he's been sacked in a season, but in terms of sack percentage, it was his worst since 2018. So for you, the big burning question is, how can this Cowboys O-line hold up this year?
It's going to be tough. It's just plain and simple. You already have Tyler Guyton, who didn't tear an ACL, but had a significant knee injury that might knock him out the first few weeks of the season. So you're already losing your premier left tackle. Your right tackle situation is even worse, and was the Terrence Steele was the worst right tackle in the NFL last year to play a significant amount of snaps. And I don't think there's much more he can improve in his game, so he is who he is at this point in his career. You're also replacing Zach Martin, who is a first ballot Hall of Fame guard. So you have to replace him. And yeah, they brought in Tyler Booker, but he's a much better run defender than he is pass protector. So you're already looking at Tyler Guyton, who's going to miss time, looking at one of the worst pass protecting right tackles in the league, a rookie who is better at run blocking than pass protecting. And then you have Cooper Beebe filling in at center, who had his struggles as a rookie. Granted, he was splitting time between center and guard and moving around. So your only proven offensive lineman right out of the gate is Tyler Smith, and he's damn good. So when you have question marks at 4 out of the 5 spots on your offensive line, more often than not, you're going to be looking at a pretty bland offense in terms of pass protection. Now, Dak can mitigate that by having sound pass protection calls for this offensive line. Brian Schottenheimer can design more under center play actions for Dak than we're used to seeing him run to help mitigate the offensive line. So can they hold their own if this offense is ran how it was last year? No, absolutely not. But if Dak Prescott is the one calling the pass protections and he knows where the weak spots are, he can help mitigate it. And if Brian Schottenheimer can keep defenses guessing by running a lot more play action than Dak has ever ran in his career, that's going to help as well. And I think if one of those two things happen or both happen, this offensive line will be better than what their actual skill level is. But if they're going to trust this offensive line to run true passing concepts and true drop back scenarios, yeah, see you later. Not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, we're moving on to the last team in the NFC East. They're the team that finished last place in the NFC East last season, the New York Giants. A lot of turnover, I should say, in the Giants roster this season. Obviously, this was last season was kind of the end of the Daniel Jones era, but now we are, kind of moving forward from, adjusting to, not we, but, Giants fans are adjusting from life without Daniel Jones to life with, the next group of guys. And I think that's really important. I think it's important to distinguish, right, between, kind of a transition time versus now you've got a quarterback room of Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart. Obviously, two names that I think are probably not there for the long term, barring some, miraculous performances from the two of them. But it feels like the two of them are there to kind of prep Jackson Dart to be the next Giants quarterback. And in the meantime, give Giants some fun games. I mean, I think there's still a lot left in the tank for both Russ and Jameis. So I don't think it's necessarily that their Giants fans should look past what they can do for this team. But obviously the focus seems to be prepping Jackson Dart for the future.
Yeah.
For you, I mean, what do you feel like Giants fans could look forward to regarding this QB room?
I think Russell Wilson and Malik Neighbors are going to take this league by storm. I think Malik Neighbors he's going to have a top 5 season in the league this year. And he was one halfway decent quarterback away last year for making that a reality last year. He was absolutely filthy on his short game and just getting yak on that. And he was missing the intermediate deep part. And as much shit as Russell Wilson gets, that's what he does for quarterbacks, or at least for receivers, right? So looking at last season, Russell Wilson in 20-plus yard situations passes, right? And this is among 43 quarterbacks that fit the criteria of what I was looking for. He was 13th in attempt rate, so he was pretty high. He was in the top 25% in terms of how often he was throwing the ball deep, or at least top 30% of how often he was throwing the ball deep. Second in adjusted completion rate. Fourth in big-time throw rate. He had the third lowest turnover-worthy play rate. He had one turnover-worthy play on 20-plus yard pass throws. Second in yards per attempt. I know PFF grades get flack, but I think it's important to paint a picture. Fourth in PFF pass grade, and third in passer rating. We're talking about last year, a top 5 quarterback in the deep pass game. That was something that Malik Neighbors was missing from his quarterbacks last year, as the Giants were the worst deep pass team in the NFL last year, minus, I believe, the Titans with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. Now, if we look at Malik Neighbors, how he did against the 49 wide receivers to get a specific amount of targets in the deep area, he had the 15th lowest target split. 17% of his routes went over 20 yards long. He was 29th in total targets, so he had the 4th most targets in the deep game. But as a percentage, did not get a whole lot of routes in the deep game. 9th lowest yards per target, 7.4. 8th lowest reception rate, and he only had one drop. His reception rate was 24.1. So that means there was a ton of deep passes that were just missed and inaccurate. 9th lowest yards per route run, 21st in receiving grade, so middle of the pack, and 11th lowest passer rating when targeted on deep passes. This was all QB play, was the reason why Malik Neighbors was not even better than he was in a tremendous rookie season from him, right? So now you add Russell Wilson, who's going to add that layer to his game. We already know he's good in the short game. He gets a ton of separation there. Now you're going to give him a quarterback who's accurate, and not just accurate, but damn good in the deep pass game.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a receiver who might go over 1,500 yards for the Giants, which I can't remember last time that happened or if that even ever has happened. I think if you have a first-round pick at the end of the first round in your fantasy drafts, go for Malik Neighbors because he is going to take off this year with Russell as his QB. And even if he gets hurt and Jameis Winston is the next guy up because they don't want to play Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston's going to target him 20 times a game because he's just going to rip it and say, fuck it, he's down there. And that alone is going to give him opportunity to make a play. And if all else fails and they put in Jackson Dart is just like J-Mo. He will rip a deep post even if it's triple covered. He doesn't care. One of those is bound to break through, and that's going to give Malik Neighbors more reps in the deep game than he ever had last year.
Mm-hmm.
So offensively, Russell Wilson is the answer this year. Jackson Dart, obviously long-term, but keep him benched as long as possible. Because we see when quarterbacks are benched longer, they play better when they finally get their chance. Ride with Russell Wilson. Let him just pick apart defenses and let him target Malik Neighbors at every level of the field.
And before we get into the defense, I'll give you a trivia question. Who is the only Giants receiver to have a 1,500-yard receiving season? This is just from what I could quickly find on the internet.
From what you could quickly find? Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I mean, it's just over 1,500 yards. So I think this might be the only one for the Giants.
It's not Odell Beckham.
Nope.
He didn't have over 1,500. Victor Cruz? No?
Got it.
Let's go.
Victor Cruz, 1,536 yards in 2011 for the Giants. The year they won the Super Bowl. So, The second one, well, the fourth for the franchise, but the second of the Eli
era
years. Moving on to the defense, I wanted to highlight an article on houseenterprise.com/theblog, which you guys should all be checking out, house-enterprise.com/theblog, because we've got a lot of great writers churning out stuff on an almost daily basis. But I wanted to highlight an article written by Kenny McDonald, who's kind of one of our resident New York Giants experts on the blog. He actually attended Giants training camp in person this year and had a lot of high marks for the defense. I mean, some of these names that you just that ring out just in terms of what they've already done for the Giants, and in terms of what of their potential. I mean, Dexter Lawrence, Darius Alexander, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and then bringing in Abdul Carter. That's a scary defense, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you like about those five guys and more that could help the Giants really win some games this year?
ESPN put out an article about guys who who would be like the best person to trade, not best person to trade away, but basically the star for each team and what their value would be if you traded them away. They said Dexter Lawrence would not command a first round pick because of how old he is. This is a nose tackle who has won in pass rush more than we've ever seen a nose tackle win. He can bull rush, speed rush. He's dominant in every way possible as a nose tackle, and he's even better when you put him in a three-tech. The problem is they can never put him in a three-tech because he's so damn good as a nose. So he gets doubled more than anybody else in pass rush, and he has one of the top 10 win rates in the NFL in pass rush, which that alone speaks volumes, right? So Dexter Lawrence is a force. I would give up 2 first-round picks today if he was available for trade. If I was an owner of a franchise, I don't care. He's that dominant. Then you have Brian Burns, who, although he's never put together a high sack total season or even a high pressure total season, he has good juice as a pass rusher. He's more finesse than he is power. And I think when he goes against good offensive tackles, they know that and they can anchor down better. But you don't go against good offensive tackles every game, right? And so I think for last year, it was just him and Dexter, right? Because we'll get into Kayvon Thibodeau later, but it was really just them last year in this pass rush. But now they add Darius Alexander, who has a ton of juice as a pass rushing defensive tackle and went way later than I thought he was going to go in the draft. They also have Roy Robertson Harris, who's pretty decent. Nunes Roches is there as well, who is, a rotational piece, but decent, right? And then you add in Abdul Carter, who can play friggin' anywhere. He was an off-ball linebacker until his senior year. They moved him to the edge because they needed it, and they saw, well, he's good at blitzing and rushing the passer there. We might as well see if he can play edge. And that was one of the best edges in the country.
Yep.
So now you're looking at, you could have a 4-man front with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau at the edges, and then Dexter Lawrence, and then some mix of Darius Alexander, Roy Robertson Harris, and Nunes Roches in the middle, right? You can have some combination of that. Then you can have Abdul off ball. You can have him line up over the center that we've seen like Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons do, where they're kind of just standing and moving around. You can have him fly off the edge as a wide 9 outside of Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau. So now you got to be like, okay, am I going to kick step 5 yards back and get wide to try to meet him there? Or am I just going to hope the running back's going to pick him up, which, spoiler alert, a running back is not picking up Abdul Carter in pass pro. So it just adds a whole other layer to this defense. They can run a 5-man front, a 4-man front, a 2-man front, even a 6-man front if they wanted to. They can run whatever front they want just by having Abdul Carter move around and just blitz, stunt, drop into coverage. Like, he's going to get dropped into coverage a lot more than I think people realize because they see defensive end or outside linebacker edge as his name next to his name. So they think he can only rush the passer. He was a pretty good linebacker his first couple of years at Penn State before they moved him to edge. I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants do that with him as well. But with that, the most glaring pain point on this defensive line has to be Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think people get misguided or misled by his 10 sack second season. Like, oh, he's taking that jump. He's good. This is why I say sacks aren't everything, are the numbers I'm about to share here. So since 2022, there's been 39 edges and 68 total players with at least 1,000 pass rushes. You would say that's a lot of pass rushes, right? That's a really good sample size. Okay. So here's where he ranks among them. So amongst the edges, he's 18th in total opportunities to rush the passer, and he's 31st in the NFL. So he's in the upper half in terms of how much volume he has of rushing the passer. He's 10th lowest in total pressures with 121 amongst edges. We'll just keep it edge numbers for now because that's where he plays. He's 10th lowest in total pressures, 7th lowest in pressure rate, 9th lowest in pass rush wins, and 6th lowest in pass rush win rate. When we look at against true pass sets, this is where it gets weird for me. He drops from 18th in total opportunities of edges in true pass sets to 33rd. He's bottom 6 amongst all those edges and opportunities. So the Giants know he's a liability and they take him off the field in true pass sets.
Yep.
But when he's out there for true pass sets, he's 10th lowest in pressure rate in true pass set, 7th lowest in pass rush win rate against true pass sets, and 7th lowest in pass rush wins total, and 11th lowest in win rate. He's got to put it together this year because this is the most help and most support he's had on the defensive line. Now he needs to do something with it and win his one-on-one matchups, which at this point, I don't know if he can. Maybe he can go up to, middle of the road average, which if he gets the average, great, awesome. But right now he's well below, and he's more of a pain point on the defensive line than he is a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then their dark horse player, going with the tight end, Thomas Fidone II.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Where do the Giants get an edge with Fidone?
So he's a long shot, right? Like this is probably going to be my biggest long shot dark horse pick, but it's obtainable. And here's why. He's currently behind Theo Johnson, who battled injuries last year, and I did not think was that good of a tight end coming out. Daniel Bellinger, who is very much a tight end too, and is not a true Y. And Chris Manhertz, who's a special teamer guy at this point in his career. He got a 9.49 relative athletic score. He is 6'5", 243 pounds, and has an 82.5-inch wingspan. So he's a massive human. He's an athletic human. And he's in a tight end room that is, in my opinion, a little bit shallow. I think Theo Johnson will be the starting Y, and he'll be their starting tight end. But I don't think he has as high of a ceiling as Fidone has. Fidone was the number 1 ranked high school tight end when he was coming out of 2021, which was higher than Brock Bowers, and he was the 46th prospect in the entire nation. That doesn't happen by accident if you don't have talent. Now, adding his athleticism, his size, and now he just needs a chance. I think if any of those tight ends go down with an injury, Fidone is going to get more snaps naturally, and he's going to excel with those snaps. And we know Russell Wilson, from time to time, does like to go to tight ends. And I think he's the one that can be a good seam runner. He can be their jump ball guy. And this is someone who might lead all their tight ends in red zone targets just because he brings that size factor. More so, I know Theo Johnson is similar size and is more athletic on paper, but I think Fidone is the better football player and understands spacing and route running and tempo a lot better than Theo Johnson does.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the burning question for the Giants, I think, comes at the head coach position. This is going to be Brian Daboll's 4th season as a skipper of the Giants. First season generated a lot of hype. Took the Giants to a 9-7-1 record. Lost in the first round to the Philadelphia Eagles. Lost in the divisional round to the Philadelphia Eagles. Next season went 6-11. Last season 3-14. It's got an overall record of 18-32-1 in 3 seasons as the head coach of the Giants. Is this the make or break year? Is this the year that he maybe not even take him to the playoffs, but just show that he's got something, show that his vision for this team has staying power?
I think he's got to make the playoffs if he wants to keep his job. And the problem is the Giants have the roughest first half schedule. There's a reality they go 0-8 to start the season. Their schedule they go against is so tough. If we just pull up the Giants schedule just for the
I got it
start
right here.
of 2025. If you want to run through them, I'll tell you if it's a win or not.
Okay. Oops. Wait, hold on. I have it right here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Week 1, Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
Washington.
That's an L.
That's a loss.
Yeah, that's a loss, especially with the offensive line being what it is.
Week 2 versus the Cowboys in Dallas.
This might be you could say maybe it's a win just based on the Cowboys won't have their rushing identity yet, and it's going to force them to pass, and this defense will eat up against that offensive line. But I think the Cowboys defense is much better than this offense, so I think it's going to be one of those low-scoring shootout games, defensively at least. I think the Cowboys can win, but to be nice to the Giants, we'll give the Giants a win here, 1-1.
Okay. Hosting the Kansas City Chiefs.
Absolutely not. 1-2.
Yep. Hosting the Chargers.
Absolutely not. 1-3. Chargers are going to be even better this year.
Against the Saints in New Orleans.
Yes, that's a win. Saints don't have a quarterback. Sorry, Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler. 2-3.
Hosting the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Absolutely not. 2-4.
Traveling to Denver to take on the Broncos.
That defense is too good. 2-5.
And then they head to Philly to play the Eagles.
Yep, no, that's not happening. 2-6. So first
playing the
games,
Eagles in 2 out of 3 weeks is tough.
That's brutal. I think that happened to him last year too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but
I think that happens to the Jets a lot with the Patriots, but I could just be like confirmation bias.
And that happens with the Bengals and the Ravens a lot too.
Yeah,
it's weird, but it happens. That's what happens when you use AI to make your schedules. It's so bad. But again, that's another conversation. But
yeah,
even after that, you play the 49ers who are fully loaded and healthy. And besides, Brandon Ayuk might be back at that point, but the defense is going to be improved. They're going to be improved in all phases. They'll be better than they were last year. So they're probably 2-7 after that. Then the Bears, if Caleb Williams takes that next jump, that offense is going to be filthy. And that defense, which we'll talk about in the NFC North episode, but before the Hail Mary was the best pass defense in the league, you're probably not beating the Bears. So you're looking at 2-8. And then after that, you got the Packers, Lions, Pats, Commanders, Vikings, Raiders, Cowboys, all good offenses, all pretty much have decent defenses, like if not great defenses. Like Giants really might go 3-14 and 4-13, and that's being nice to the first half of their schedule. That's saying they probably pick one up against the Cowboys and they probably beat the Saints.
Yeah. So tough draw for the Giants, but we'll see how, they try to get it done. But still, there's a lot of young talent on this team, man.
There is. Look, if this defense comes through and Russell Wilson isn't a pumpkin, which not that he is, not that he is because he's not, but he's at that age and he's kind of been moved around a lot.
It's true.
He's got to have an average season as far as Russell Wilson is concerned for this offense to be functional. If he's below average, Russell Wilson, it's going to be a long year for this offense. And I think this defense is going to carry this team regardless of how good the offense is. But yikes, not looking good for Giants fans.
Yeah. So that wraps up our coverage of the 2025 NFC East. Jordan and I are going to continue for the next 3 weeks covering all 8 divisions in the NFL, plus playoff predictions, plus awards predictions.
Yeah.
All leading up to kickoff on September 4th. So keep your eyes on all House Enterprise channels. For those of you watching on YouTube or on houseenterprise.com, you can see all of our socials on the ticker below. You can see my socials on this ticker below. And then you can see Jordan's handle right here at Jordan Laube, FB, Jordan Laube, FB. You make sure you follow that. Yeah. We'll be cutting up all these videos to give you individual team breakdowns on our YouTube channel. So make sure, if you want to see just us talking about your team, you'll be able to find that. But we think some of these divisional previews will be really great so you can get a good survey of your team's opponents in 2025.
Yeah. And I know we're pushing 2 hours here. Trust us. The rest of the videos will not be that long. We had a red zone talk and we had a top 10 quarterback talk.
We talked about the Super Bowl champs.
Exactly.
You got to give them their due. So with that, thank you so much again for listening. Thank you so much again for watching. Make sure you follow us on our socials. And for Jordan, I'm Sam Basel. This has been the Basel Pod, and we'll see you guys next time.